All of these terms are called organelles, which I think is meant to be like tiny organs within a cell. You know how like your body is made up of a heart and eyes and ears and all these different parts of your body? Cami, my youngest, is 1 year old. We play a game with her at night before bed where we say, Cami, where's your eyes? And she blinks her eyes like this. And then, Cami, where's your hair? And she does this. And my favorite one, Cami, where's your toes? And she wiggles her toes, right? Those are all your different organs. Well, organelles are all of the parts inside a cell. Okay? On their own, they can't function. So a cell is still the smallest living thing, but it does break up into smaller pieces still. Nucleuses and vacuoles and mitochondria. Okay? But like a vacuole on its own is not alive. And a nucleus on its own is not alive. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you may want to add the word organelle to your list then, because it's another one of the black bolded words. Basically, that's our focus today. We want to talk about what is inside a cell. How does it work? What's inside there? Okay. Before I do that, I've got more definitions. Yay! Eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Ever heard those words before? Nope. All right. Here's some definitions for you. Eukaryotes have a nucleus in a membrane. We'll talk more about nucleus and membranes later, but it's a type of cell that has a nucleus in a membrane, whereas the prokaryotes don't, basically. So it's like one or the other. Either you have a membrane nucleus or you don't. Probably the best way of remembering this is that most things are eukaryotic. Plants, animals, usually those have membrane-bound cells.
Sorry, I have to ask you, class, where were they going on the field trip today? Is that
Scuba
diving and then rock climbing? Or?
Yeah. One of the two.
You look just
Scuba
like
diving, then rock climbing.
Was it scuba diving then rock climbing? Okay, thank you.
okay.
I don't know the
Yeah, I'm just curious what the. Okay. Bacteria and viruses.
No, sorry.
Are you okay there?
Yeah. My papers aren't okay. Keep going, Sean.
All right. Viruses and bacteria are in the bottom category there. They don't actually have nuclei. Nuclei is the plural. So there are some cells that can actually get away without having to have a nucleus. So all I really need you guys to know is that the eukaryotes are kind of the regular things that we normally work with, plants and animals. But bacteria are cells, but they kind of operate a little differently. So, more words to add to your word list. Like I said, by the time we're done this unit, it's going to be pages long.
I've already got pages now.
Probably, right? So, okay, most of our notes are often pictures today. I don't actually have a lot to add other than just kind of pointing out some key features. Here would be a good example of what a cell might look like. And if you're looking to do that construction project, it may look something like this. I've already given the idea that you could make me a bowl of Jell-O. And that would totally be a good way of representing a cell. Inside the bowl is the Jell-O, and put like a jawbreaker for a nucleus and some candies in there for mitochondria and other things.
Can eat it after.
And then we can eat it. I mean, isn't that the best science project in the world? The one you can eat? So, anyways. Actually, why don't I talk about your research project or your construction project for a few seconds here. What I'm looking for you to do is make me a cell, and there should be 10 different organelles within the cell.
Okay.
That's it. Okay. Now, that's worth 2 marks for each organelle. So 2 times 10 is 20 marks then. Okay. But I do want them to be like, what's the right word? Like the right physical representation. Like, for example, the nucleus should probably be something in the shape of a ball. That would work, right? A grape would work. Whereas if you made the nucleus like a penny, the nucleus isn't shaped like a penny. Does that make sense? Whereas like the Golgi apparatus, it needs to be like flat discs. Maybe a penny might actually work for those instead. These ones right here are bending, so maybe a penny doesn't work quite as well, but something flexible. Okay, but try to find something that actually is appropriate in terms of its approximate shape. So like, don't put a Rubik's cube in for the nucleus. That's not the right shape. That's a cube, not a sphere.
Solve it.
Okay. The other part of your project, though, is not just making me the cell, but I want you to attach a legend to it where you tell me what each piece is, describe what it does, and find me some other cool facts about it. You guys see that when you're reading that rubric there? You get 2 marks for the actual making of each organelle, but the more important section is the 3 marks for describing what each of these things do. The construction project is intended to be like a long-term kind of project. It'll be due the day before we leave for Christmas. Okay. Now you can hand it in beforehand if you want, so that you can take your cell home and eat it over Christmas if you'd like. But you can also work in up to groups of 3 to help kind of cut down on the amount of work you have to do, because it may be a little bit more work to actually make this cell. So then you can kind of conquer and divide and split up the work. So you don't have to work in a group of 3, but you can, or a group of 2, or by yourself. Does that make sense, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. If you go in further levels of biology, you'll probably learn about other organelles. Like as you look at this particular picture I found on the internet, it's got like microfilaments and microtubules, and we don't cover those in this course. So the only things I'm going to expect of you are the following ones in these slides here. So here are some of the organelles and more or less what they do. So let's walk through them. If you imagine a cell to be like, say, an egg, the cell membrane would be the shell of that egg around the outside of it. Something protective keeping it all on the inside. Or maybe another example of a cell membrane would be like when you put something in a plastic bag. The bag itself contains everything. So the cell membrane just basically keeps everything stuck inside the cell. It's a protective barrier. Yeah, seal works, right? If you were to make your Jell-O, what would you have to put your Jell-O in to make a cell membrane then?
Like a bowl.
Sure, like a bowl, yeah. You could say that your bowl is your cell membrane then. Does that make sense? So, within the cell is the nucleus, and the nucleus is large enough that you should be able to see. And basically, the nucleus is like the brain of the cell. It's the direction of what direction? Well, it directs all of the traffic. In my mind, I like the movie Inside Out.
Well,
Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
If you've seen that movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's that like central hub where fear and sadness and all the other. Who has seen that movie, by the way? Okay, so a few of you have. My daughter loves Inside Out, so you have to watch it. Like with sadness and fear and joy and stuff. It's a good movie, yeah. Anyways, I think of the nucleus of a cell kind of like the control center in that movie, where the 5 different little emotions were all living. That's kind of like the nucleus of the cell. It's the I don't know, the information center. Does that make sense? Does anybody know what's contained inside the nucleus that's so important? Oh, okay, focus again. Focus.
DNA.
Yeah, good job. DNA, yeah. Within the nucleus of the cell is located the DNA. And the nucleus is basically the part of the cell that contains the information required to replicate new cells. So that when your cells divide and make more, that's where that information is located. Another main part of the cell is called cytoplasm. And cytoplasm is kind of like the liquid jelly that kind of fills up the cell.
That's like the Jell-O part.
Yeah, that'd be the Jell-O part. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it's kind of like the filler, if that makes sense, right? There's not like gaps inside the cell. Otherwise, all these different little pieces would fall all over the place. It's what suspends them in place. Okay, these next 2 down here, you should put a little note. Cell walls and chloroplasts only exist in plant cells. Put a little note there. Chloroplasts and cell walls only exist in plant cells. Now, a cell wall is very similar to a cell membrane. Sorry, cell wall and chloroplasts only found in plants, not in humans. So you don't have chloroplasts in your cells, unless somehow you are a plant hybrid person.
Away from the garden.
Okay, cell walls kind of work in tandem with the membrane, and what they do is they make the plants very structured, so they have like a frame to it. when I think of a cell wall, I think of like a car body. The membrane of the car might be the actual like door, but you know how like there's a frame to a car that everything gets bolted onto? That's what I think of when I think of a cell wall. It's like the inside box, and then on that inside box we bolt everything to it. That's my analogy in my mind that I think of. It provides support, basically. Does anybody know what chloroplasts do?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the keyword is photosynthesis. I guess it's listed here. Do you guys know much about photosynthesis?
Yeah.
What is it?
My girlfriend.
Okay, so you all are saying things that are true. Why don't you write photosynthesis down as one of your words? Because this should definitely be on your word list. And let me give you a better definition for photosynthesis. Plants need to grow. And one of the things they need to grow is light. If you don't give plants light, they don't grow. So plants will take light, and they're also going to take one of the gases from our atmosphere, carbon dioxide, and you also have to water a plant. There are 3 requirements, guys.
Yes.
3 requirements for photosynthesis. Light, you have to water the plant, and it needs carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. And what photosynthesis does is it basically uses all 3 of those things, and it makes sugars. And then the plant can eat those sugars to live. So it makes its own food. So one more time. Plants need carbon dioxide from our atmosphere, light from the sun, or some sort of other artificial light, I guess would work. And water. You have to water a plant. And it will make a sugar, basically. That's photosynthesis. Have you guys ever heard that before? Like, clearly you know something about this. Okay, moving on. All cells should have storage containers inside them where they need to store various things. Like, for example, it might store food or it might store waste. Okay? Those are either known as vesicles or vacuoles. I'll probably use the word vacuole more often than not, but basically it's like I almost think of it like a pod. I kind of think of like a Star Wars ship, and there's like an escape pod, you know, and basically there's a little pod just kind of sitting inside the cell, just a little sphere, and inside that sphere happens to be, you know, food or waste or something, right? One of the cool things about vesicles and vacuoles is that they can move throughout the cell, and so vesicles can actually move to the edge of a cell and can actually meld with the membrane and open up and release stuff to the outside, almost like a disposal system, like a garbage truck. It kind of like, the vacuole is like the bubble in the middle, and the bubble will migrate towards the edge of the cell, and it'll like spit stuff out of the cell to get rid of its waste. Does that make sense? So
It's like just space.
I guess,
It's
yeah.
like you think of all the Earth's cells,
Hmm.
and we're actually
So we're actually inside a cell.
Yeah.
Ever seen the end of Men in Black?
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
You've seen Men in Black? Where they like open the locker and then inside the locker is another world and there's another world? Yeah.
Yeah, like what if it's like that? You ever think of that? All the stars and stuff.
Alright, anyways, moving on. These next 2 kind of go together. These next 2 go together. You probably haven't heard these words before, I'm guessing. They are endoplasmic reticulum and ribosomes. One of the ways that I recall that they work together in functions is that reticulum and ribosomes both start with R. I know that's not like the greatest memory device in the world, but these 2 work together. That's why I put them near each other. Basically, the idea is that endoplasmic reticulum are like the transport system. I think of it like the subway. Stuff needs to get around inside your cells, and so the endoplasmic reticulum, or sometimes we say ER just to simplify it. The ER is like the subway system. Stuff transfers through it. Anyone ever been to Costco? And you see those like little tube systems that they put like the money in and it sucks it all up. And you know what I'm talking about? There? They have those at Costco.
Where?
Like right by the tills.
Really?
I didn't know that till like the last time I went to the association.
My wife works at the hospital. They have an intermail system there too, where they, you know, the little plastic canister, you seal it up, you put it in the tube, and it sucks it away somewhere else.
Well, that's on Elm.
Sure, they have those there too.
Yeah.
In my mind, when I think of endoplasmic reticulum, I think of this in a way. where it's the transport system where you need to get something through the cell. It's the inner workings. Okay. What might you want to transport throughout a cell? One of the most common things you might want to transport then would be proteins. And so that's why ribosomes go right next to it, is that ribosomes make proteins. And so directly next to the transport system is the place that makes all these proteins, so you can send them wherever you need them to. Does that make sense? So those two things usually go together. If you have certain cell diagrams, there's actually two kinds of endoplasmic reticulum. There is rough and smooth endoplasmic. I'm not overly concerned about the differences, but it's almost like your small and large intestines, where there's like more than one type. So. Next one is called a lysosome, and when I think of lysosomes, I think of the word Lysol. I don't know if that makes sense, but Lysol is a disinfectant that kills things. And that's what lysosomes do. Just like Lysol, it kind of gets rid of all the bad stuff. Maybe it is, actually. Maybe it is. So they have enzymes, and they destroy invaders and damaged organelles. So if stuff tries to break into the cell, the lysosomes will try to kill the bad stuff. I know it's kind of a broad word for it. Or let's say that there's an organelle that's starting to die and be damaged. Rather than poison the cell from the inside, a lysosome will break it down, send it to a vacuole, and the vacuole will spit it out of the cell. Can I say that one more time? Let's say that you have a mitochondria. We haven't talked about that yet, but let's say a mitochondria is not working anymore. Well, rather than having a broken mitochondria, basically what should happen is a lysosome should engulf it, break it down, like destroy it to its basic pieces, send it to a vacuole, and the vacuole will spit it out of the cell. In a way, that whole system is kind of like taking out the garbage. Does that make sense? Well, your body does this every day. So. Okay, Golgi apparatus are basically like the precursors to vacuoles. They're discs that can end up like forming like a circle and engulfing something to make like a pod almost, if you like that analogy. So like I like to think of it just as like a flat piece of paper here, and this thing will eventually do that kind of concept. And inside there is now a vacuole that can transport stuff around if you want. Does that make sense? So, that's Golgi apparatus. And the last one here, mitochondria. I think you guys have heard that one before. Yeah. It basically is like the power station, where it controls all of the energy is the right word to use. Does anybody know ATP? Okay. ATP stands for adenine triphosphate, I believe. It's either adenine or adenine triphosphate. I'm going to Google it later for you guys, but basically it's a certain type of energy unique to cells. It's the energy that the cell uses. I know that TP is a triphosphate. I just can't remember the full first word now. Okay. Those are the organelles I want you guys to know. Okay. Are there more than those ones? Yes. But those are the ones I need you guys to know about. So add them to your list. And what I need for you guys to be able to do is identify a picture of one of them, know what they do, know what they're similar to, like give me some analogies for them. Like for example, I already gave some of my favorite analogies. Here's a slide that has some differences between plants and animals. Plants have to have cell walls, but humans actually don't. Plants have chloroplasts because they're able to make their own energy using the sun, but we as humans don't. Usually what happens in a plant cell is a plant cell will have one really big storage center. I like to think of that as like one really big warehouse. Whereas an animal cell might have like a vacuole here, and maybe a smaller one here and a smaller one here. And that would be like having like a small
All grade sixers who are going to the symphony need to come to the front right now. Thank you. All grade sixers go to the symphony, come to the front.
So let me try my analogy one more time. It would be like going to, I don't know, like say you're Walmart. There's a Walmart in Calgary. There's probably one big distribution warehouse where Walmart keeps all of their stuff somewhere in the in the industrial section. That would be like a plant cell, keeping all of their stuff in just one big location, right? Whereas in an animal cell, they keep all of their stuff at like random smaller stores around the city. Does that make sense for that analogy? So plants just have one big vacuole. The other thing is that animals will have lysosomes, but plants usually don't. Anyone want to hazard a reason why? Say that again? But what do lysosomes do?
They give the energy.
They get rid of things that are broken down and die. So, like, what happens to a human if one of your cells starts to break down and die?
They start making more.
Yeah, because what ends up happening is the cell will repair itself and hopefully it'll keep living. However, in plant cells, if plant cells start to die, I mean, that's how you end up having dead cells. Like, for example, we talked about cork the other day. Cork used to be made of wood. Well, it is made of wood, right? Wood used to be part of a plant. That plant used to be alive, but now is not. Does that make sense? Oh, and so I think there's a bit of a difference between plant and animal cells in that it's okay for plant cells to start dying off because that's kind of a natural process, but maybe not so much with humans and animals. Usually those cells are going to want to try to keep alive more and more as long as possible. You know, eventually cells will die, obviously, right? Cells do need to get broken down, but hopefully individual parts within the cell of the plant, I mean, if they start breaking down, then okay, I guess the plant starts to die. Does that logic make sense? Okay. There's one more term that may come up. I don't think I'll bring it up too often, but there's also an organelle called a centriole. And centrioles are involved in cell division. They're the thing inside cells that causes cells to replicate and split into new cells. But normally most textbooks don't talk too much about centrioles in grade 10. So. The rest here is just a bunch of pictures. So you just have an idea of kind of where these things are and what they look like. So, anyways, moving on. This is probably one of the coolest slides I found. It's got everything in a little bit of detail, and it's got even more words on here for you can read. So as long as it came through on your notes well enough that you can read this, this is probably a pretty good summary slide. Now it does have more things than we cover. Like for example, we're not going to talk about a perioxome, so don't worry about that. But, I mean, it will talk about cytoplasm, mitochondria, lysosomes. Yeah, technically the nucleus actually has different parts to it. There's actually the nucleolus, the envelope, and the pore. There's actually different layers to it. I would like you in your project to talk about that. I think I mentioned in the project there just the idea that some of these things have more than one part. Like, for example, endoplasmic reticulum.
What's it called? A whole bunch to give the different
That's a clever idea. I'd be okay if you just talked about it and just mentioned the fact that there are two types of reticulum. There are like different parts to a nucleus.
That's smart though. Like you can make it up.
Good. Okay. Last topic, then we're done for the day. I want to focus really specifically on the cell membrane. It has a very important job. Its job is to be a barrier, but like a dual barrier. Its job is to keep things in and to prevent anything else from getting out. No, I think I said the same thing twice. Yeah, you want to keep things in, but you also don't want anything else to get in. Does that make sense? Kind of like a plastic bag. If I put my lunch in a plastic bag, one, I don't want my lunch to fall out of the plastic bag. But two, I don't want like all sorts of germs to get inside either. So it has two purposes. Prevent things from escaping or from entering. That being said, there are occasions where things do need to go in and out of a cell. For example, like when a cell breaks down an organelle and has to get rid of it. If it doesn't get rid of it, it'll eventually like poison itself. It would be no different than like as a person. If you did not have the ability to get rid of your wastes, I mean, through like your poop, right? If that was getting stored up inside of you, you'd eventually start poisoning yourself. Does that make sense? Like if you couldn't go to the bathroom, that becomes a problem after a while. Well, a cell has the exact same concept. A cell has to get rid of its poop. Does that make sense? So you do have to find a way to let things in and out of cells. Okay. So the cell itself, the membrane is made of something called the phospholipid bilayer. There's another word to write down on your word list. So I'll give you a second to write that down, and then we'll talk about
That's a
what
long word.
phospholipid bilayer.
I already got that one.
Good job. Okay, so the term phospholipid bilayer, kind of on its own, describes a lot about it. I'm going to start at the end of the word, layer. Well, I think you guys know what layers mean, probably. If it is a bilayer, bi refers to two. You guys still with me? So there are two layers to the membrane. There's the outer layer and the inner layer. And this picture right here hopefully can kind of describe the idea of what it looks like. There's a layer on top and a layer on the bottom. But those layers are actually made up of two things, phosphates and lipids. Hence the term phospholipid, made from phosphates and lipids. The way this works is the phosphates get to face out. So it's like the outer edges of both sides are the phosphates. And we have a term for them, we call them hydrophilic, meaning that they're okay with water. They like water, but the inside most layer, this is where there's like those blue lines, like tails almost, those are called hydrophobic, and they don't like water. And so what ends up happening is you get this like double-sided barrier where water can be on this side, and water can be on this side, but water should never be found in the middle. Does that make sense? And as a membrane, it keeps things either on one side or on the other. So it's a double layer. It keeps things from getting out, and it keeps things from coming in. I mean, unless there are things that are supposed to come in and out. And we're going to talk about those in another day. But basically add these notes as well. Hydrophilic likes water. Hydrophobic doesn't like water. Yeah, phobia means to be afraid of. So if you can just remember that phobia means doesn't like, then philic must mean does like. Or maybe you have a friend named Phil who you really like. And that way you can remember that Phil is a good guy, so you should like him.
Phil Collins.
There we go. Everybody loves Phil Collins. Okay. Here's a picture of what the phospholipid bilayer should look like. Okay, where are the phosphates?
The middle, the green stuff, right?
No,
Blue stuff, yeah. Phosphates are on the outsides, and the lipids are on the insides. Ideally, there should be no water getting through this layer right here. This is like that impenetrable layer where water can be at the very bottom of the screen, water can be on the very top of the screen, but this should be an impenetrable, well, not impenetrable, but it's a barrier that things should not be able to pass.
What are the red stuff called?
I think the reds are just something that connects between the two. I don't actually know.
What's the green stuff called?
The green is the lipids, though. So like the insides are the lipids, and the outsides are the phosphates. Okay, last couple of slides here. We're going to spend a whole day next week talking about how stuff gets in and out of a cell, because that's super important. But just to kind of be a bit of like a preamble to that, inside the phospholipid bilayer are proteins. And so this is a picture right here of what the phospholipid bilayer might look like, where you've got all of these phosphate-lipid kind of combinations right here. But in between there, there's these proteins. And those proteins are almost like doors and windows, where if the protein opens up, something can get in or out of the cell. Does that make sense? So you might actually discover all of these little things interspersed within the actual membrane. And sometimes we have this phrase for it. We call it a fluid mosaic model. That's the term we use to describe the idea that you've got these phosphates, you've got these lipids, you've also got all these proteins. All of these things make a mosaic.
Do we have to write that mosaic?
It's another bolded word. Yeah. Like I said, bio really is just a lot of memorization. Oh, one suggestion, by the way. Flashcards are great for biology. Like if you're learning for looking for a learning tool to help you memorize all of these words, because I mean we've only just started and you probably have like a page and a half, 2 pages. So we'll be getting pretty extensive. Flashcards would be a good piece of advice. Okay, last slide. The idea behind the cell membrane is that it's supposed to maintain what's called equilibrium. Some things are allowed to go in, some things are not. We actually have a word for that. The cell membrane is called semi-permeable. Have you guys ever heard that word before? Yeah. Okay, basically it means that selectively some stuff can get in and out, but other stuff can't. For example, oxygen and carbon dioxide. They can travel easily in and out. And we need that in, say, like a red blood cell. A red blood cell's job is to carry oxygen to your body through your arteries, and then exchange it for carbon dioxide, and then it goes back through your veins. Does that make sense? So your cells have to be able to let oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out easily. Well, that's kind of like this picture right here. The blue balls there might be like, say, water or germs or something like that. Thank you for laughing.
Oh, wow.
The blue spheres, is that better? The blue spheres could be like, say, water. Water does not easily go in and out of the cell. Whereas the red spheres could be like, say, water, it could be carbon dioxide and oxygen. They can pass in and out of the cell easily, but the rest can't. Yeah, I lost you guys. Alright. You guys have any questions? Okay. Today's topic then basically, know what is inside a cell. Next week, we're going to do a lesson on transport, where we're going to talk more and more about how stuff moves around either inside the cell itself or how things get in and out. Because that's very important. You know, how does a sugar get in and out? How does water get in and out when it needs to? Because normally it's not supposed to, but occasionally you might need to add some water to a cell. Does that make sense? Oh, by the way, I had an example here of something else that's semi-permeable. Do you guys know what Gore-Tex is?
Gore-Tex?
Ever heard of Gore-Tex?
No, never.
Anybody a snowboarder? Anybody snowboard or ski?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of clothing is starting to be made with Gore-Tex. It's like a breathable plastic. The idea being that, like, when you go snowboard, ideally the Gore-Tex should keep water from getting inside your coat. Does that make sense? But if it's like, if you wore like literally like a plastic bag, you would start sweating like crazy, and you'd have water inside your coat because you'd be sweating so much. Does that make sense? And so what Gore-Tex does is it keeps water out, but it lets oxygen and other gases still go through. Does that make sense? Whereas, like, say, a plastic bag is not really so permeable because it kind of keeps everything out on both sides. Does that make sense? Okay, so semi-permeable basically means that some stuff can go through, like, say, oxygen and carbon dioxide, but water can't. So, yeah, think of like a jacket. A jacket is semi-permeable. Okay, I think it's about stopping time. Okay, last thought here. Today and tomorrow is some work time. If I can give some advice, get a head start on things. Okay. Just with where this unit is located, being right before Christmas, I'm thinking that you probably would like to be done everything well before your Christmas break so that you're not rushing to, you know, finish things up before we have to leave. So I would recommend, like, get as much of that assignment done as we realistically can. One of the questions on the assignment then is to label that cell that's listed in the corner of that this assignment here, and to talk about all the different functions. You should probably be able to get up to number 7 now on the assignment. And I'd also recommend that you probably, while doing that, could start on the legend of your construction project and start talking about, okay, what is a nucleus? What is a mitochondria? What is a Golgi apparatus? Does that make sense? So you have today and tomorrow as work time. I know we don't have like a lot of stuff that's due yet, but use the time now so that you get ahead of the game. And this is one of the reasons why, Gabe, I wanted to do today as a lesson day, because yeah, I want to give you a couple of work days now to start working on this. So go take a break and then yeah, start working on stuff. Sorry, give me 1 second.